Welcome back. Commercial aircraft across Europe and the Middle East report incidents where their GPS units are telling them they're not on the course they think they're on. So far, military aircraft haven't reported those kinds of incidents publicly. Ronak Shah is Senior Director for Research at Shift5. Ronak, welcome. Thanks for joining me. What is GPS spoofing, and how does it compare to some of the other issues with GPS that are potential national security threats?
Thank you, Francis, for having me on the show today. It's great to be here to talk about such an important issue. GPS spoofing involves creating false GPS signals that can deceive a GPS receiver into thinking it's in a different position or time. You may have heard of GPS jamming, which involves creating interference or noise at the same frequency as GPS signals. Ultimately, what this does is it prevents GPS receivers from being able to do navigation and timing-based operations.
The impact seems to be obvious. If an aircraft doesn't think it's going where it's actually going or thinks it's going a different place, that's a big problem. How does that impact the national security spectrum?
Yeah, I think outside of our military operations, if you take a look at our critical infrastructure sectors here at home, such as aviation, energy, transportation, telecommunications, they all use systems that utilize GPS. Thankfully, a lot of GPS spoofing attacks have not been occurring here at home. We've been predominantly seeing them globally, particularly in conflict zones. The reason for this is the commoditization of GPS spoofing equipment, and this has led to the proliferation of this equipment and getting into the hands of our adversaries. This has led to their ability to conduct GPS spoofing attacks against military assets. Some of the unintended consequences of this have bled into the commercial industry as well, such as maritime and aviation. Our military depends on our civil air reserve fleet, as well as relies on our commercial aviation sector for transporting goods across the globe. If you can imagine a cargo aircraft veering off course, it could potentially not have enough fuel to land somewhere safely. Beyond just not being able to deliver those goods, it could potentially create geopolitical rifts as well.
What are all the security components of this that need to be tightened? Who needs to secure what in order to prevent this from seeping into military systems, the civil reserve fleet as you just described, and so on?
I think how we need to think about this problem is that we need to have better data across the board. The Department of Defense, I think, can stitch together different diverse data sets, including onboard data, to have better observability of these platforms. Ultimately, what this will allow is military leadership and, quite frankly, the industry at large to make better decisions around mitigation and prevention techniques.
What are the long-term steps that you see the Pentagon, civil organizations in government, and others doing to achieve what you just described? What do they have to do to get to that place that you just talked about?
I think there are a number of things that need to happen in order to get there. Like I mentioned, I think in order to have a better comprehensive understanding of GPS spoofing attacks, we need to keep pace with our adversaries and their capabilities. And so what we need to have is better observability of these platforms, the environments that surround them, to kind of understand how our adversaries are conducting these attacks. Ultimately, also, I think the DoD needs to invest in sort of the future of position, navigation, and timing technologies. But at the end of the day, without observability of these platforms and how GPS spoofing is impacting the various systems on board, we won't have a better understanding to improve the lethality, to provide this, improve the survivability and security of these platforms.
When you talk about knowing how the bad guys are doing it, what do we know about how the bad guys are doing it now? How granular of a body of knowledge do we have about the way that they do this?
Yeah, I think our military has been facing these attacks for a number of years now, and we're seeing this sort of bleed out into the commercial industry. And so there's quite a bit of knowledge around understanding GPS spoofing attacks. However, what we have seen also from industry is anti-jamming and anti-spoofing capabilities being baked into GPS receivers that ultimately get installed on these platforms. But this stops short of solving the problem completely. You need to have comprehensive data to be able to understand the problem more intimately.
Is there a way to judge success in this other than we continue to have no incidents?
I think we'll always continue to see incidents, even with new technologies. And that's why, right, going back to having a comprehensive data approach allows us to be able to understand how our adversaries are adapting to new technologies. There's this constant cat and mouse game that we're playing, right? And in order to always stay ahead of that, we need to be able to have the data to inform our decision makers to make intelligent decisions.
Ronak, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, Francis. Thank you.
You can read more about GPS spoofing on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, creating a two-way street for discussion with industry at CMS. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.